Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you. Wow, I have a lot to live up to. As I was driving here today to the event, I remember what the organizers asked me to do. They said to talk about Islam, and I have, about 40 minutes, and then take QA. And I was thinking that was unfair, because when you think about Noah, for instance, God gave him 950 years to talk about his faith. And then Abraham was 200 years. Moses was 120 years. And then Jesus wasn't given really a chance to fulfill his whole mission as the Messiah. He'll come back and finish the job. But at least he tried for 23 years to deliver the message. So now I'm asked to perform a miracle today, so pray for me, please, okay? But honestly, when I was thinking about this, and I said, the message of Islam is a very simple message. There is no mystery about it. Actually, there is a mystery aspect of Islam is completely lacking. It's a simple faith to understand. The main premise behind the whole faith of Islam is that there is one God, the Creator, infinite, all-powerful, merciful, just, fair, and created all of us and will judge us. So that's really the simple and most important aspect. In fact, what's really interesting, and honestly, when I was driving here this morning, I was saying this was really great. There is a famous saying by Prophet Muhammad who says that anyone who professes there is only one God shall receive salvation. This is a really important fundamental in Islam that Muslim scholars agree to, but they don't want everybody to know. Because you will find from my talk today that I don't like the organizations of religion, although I think religion and faith are very important aspects of our life. At any rate, so God, the Creator, the most powerful, God, the merciful, God, the just, created us, created the whole universe, and may have created other things that we're not aware of. In fact, most likely He did, but we don't know what those universes are because we're limited. And I want to explain something to you. When I say God as He, this is really, it's a limitation of Latin languages because we don't know how to refer to God. In fact, what Islam teaches is that giving God a name is somewhat of a limitation, because you point to, we share this with the Jewish faith, that pointing to God, giving God a name is you're pointing to God, and when you point to God, you limit God, and God is not someone who you can limit. But at any rate, because we are limited, we have to refer to God with something. And if you go to churches or synagogues or mosques or any other temple in the Middle East, in the Arab world, all of them, bar none, call that God Allah. So when I refer to the word, or when I bring up the word Allah, that's really not an exclusive Muslim word. I've gone to churches in the Middle East, Arab churches. I've seen synagogues, I didn't go into them. I've seen other temples, and you would see in the name of Allah, right at the door, you go inside and the priest and everybody speak about Allah. So keep this in mind as I refer to God or Allah. The word Allah itself means the God, literally. So everybody refers to that God. And all other references, when we say God is the most merciful, God is Creator, God is just, God is powerful, those are literally just references to our observation of how God interacts with us. God's description or attributes are far more than we can ever imagine. It's not a mystery, it's just that God is bigger than us. Not in the literal sense, but in the figurative sense. And because of that, we have to have these descriptions. So part of God's, or one of God's attributes is that He's a creator. And as a creator, that attribute would be meaningless if there isn't a creation. So the fact that God can create, has the power to create, becomes manifested in a creation. Because God is all-powerful and is creative, then God creates His creation, a diverse creation. As part of that diverse creation is black and white, big and small, hot and cold, Scandinavian, and what's the opposite of Scandinavian? Okay, Italian, thank you. All right, okay, and what have you. So as God, one of those distinctions or pairs is God creates creatures of no choice, just to simplify the theological terminology, and obviously creatures of choice. Creatures of no choice are things like mountains, trees, many of the things that have absolutely no choice about what happens to them, or they have no choice in judging what is right and wrong. They don't know what's right and wrong. Although Islam teaches that everything, even inanimate objects, have a level of consciousness and self-awareness, and because they have self-awareness, then they are aware of God as well, their creator. Okay? But one of the creatures that God created and gave choice is human beings, or us, mankind. There is another creature that has been given choice that's called the jinn in Arabic, and if you are familiar with extra-canonical gospels, there is an extra-canonical gospel that's called the Gospel of Solomon that actually talks about jinn. They call them demons. But at any rate, so that creature, the invisible creature, because we're visible, that creature has choice. But as God clearly states in the Quran, that humans, or mankind, humankind, are the only ones who have been given dominion by God over the earth and the heavens. So our dominion is not, according to Islam, limited to our control over the earth. Not yet, at least. We're trying, right? We're trying to go to Mars and beyond, and who knows, we may. But God gave us the authority to be able to do that. With that dominion comes responsibility. Because the word Islam in itself, Muslims often are quick to say, well, Islam means peace, and Islam means submission. Actually, the word Islam has a much deeper meaning than that, which is really to live in peace and harmony with God's creation. That's what it means to have dominion. Yes, God gave us the ability to change mountains, wipe out mountains. God gave us the ability also to create the nuclear bomb and kill each other with it. And God gave us the ability to discover things that no other creatures can discover. So with that ability comes responsibility, and the main responsibility that we have is to be in harmony with everything that God has created. That's really the purpose of religion in Islam. Not to worship God, because God doesn't need us to worship Him. God doesn't need anything from us. To be a good Muslim, according to the teachings of Islam, is to be in harmony with everything around you, whether it's other humans, yourself, your family, the environment, and of course, your Creator. That's the meaning of Islam. Complete submission to God and to God's law, and we'll talk about this a little further in a minute. So this is the meaning of Islam, and God created us, the creatures of choice, and gave us dominion. What God gave us to be able to perform our task is He gave us a number of things. One, He gave us what's called the internal messenger. That internal messenger is our ability to discern between right and wrong. And that's broken down into two parts. One is our brain, our reason, our ability to say this is good or this is bad. Okay? Our ability to think and rationalize things, because we're rational beings. And everybody has that. It doesn't matter if you're a Muslim, non-Muslim, atheist, it doesn't really matter what it is. Everybody has an equal amount within a range, right? Because some of us are smarter than others, right? Okay? So the other aspect of this other thing that God gave us is something that's called fitra. Fitra it's an innate power or ability that God built in us that's a mixture of reason and feeling, where we know what is right and what's wrong. Someone was telling me recently that the Nazis experimented on children, where they took two children, they put one in a room, and they just gave that child food from birth, just gave the child food without any human interaction, and tested that child's ability to decide of what's right and what's wrong, and they found that the child still didn't like animals to be killed in front of it. And you find this to be really built in all of us. I want to tell you a story that actually stays with me forever and will go with me to the grave. When I arrived in the United States in October 10th, 1977, I arrived in New York, flew to Logan Airport in Boston, and when I was in Boston, I was walking around scared to death. You know, this is the first time I come to America. By the way, it could have been Germany. I had no clue. My parents really didn't care where I went. They just wanted to get rid of me, obviously, right? I still have some issues with that, you know? So I was at the airport and I was approached by 3 gentlemen. 2 were your average European American, and one was clearly, from the way he looked and from his excellent accent, was an East Indian. One of the gentlemen asked me, they said, you know, can we ask you a question? I said, sure. I didn't know what missionaries were, because the missions or the Muslim missionaries that I encountered didn't act like this. But anyway, so this guy asked me a question. He said, do you think lying is bad? I said, of course. I don't know you. I didn't lie to you. I didn't know what he was going with this. He said, do you think cheating is bad? I said, of course it's bad. Well, how about telling the truth? Yeah, it's good. And I was really freaked out. I didn't know why they were asking me those questions. And then the Indian guy said, you see, that's what all religions teach. But in order for you to have salvation, you have to accept Jesus as the way of God and as the Messiah. I said, but I do accept him as the Messiah. And he said, well, do you have to accept him as the way to God? And I said, absolutely. Remember, my English wasn't that good, and everything that he said to me, I agreed with. And then they looked at each other and said, well, we have to talk and get back to you. But what they were talking about really was that fitra, which is, that's built in us. I didn't have to be a Muslim or a Jew or a Buddhist or Indian or an atheist. We all have that drive within us when we see something vulnerable. Anything that's vulnerable in our environment, we want to help it. I can tell you, it doesn't matter what our faith is, we're all today are torn because of the oil spill that's happening in our southern shores. It breaks my heart. It doesn't matter what your faith is. That's because God built in us something that's called fitra that tells us what is right and what's wrong and how to feel about things. So that's the second aspect of this. The third aspect of this is that by itself, those 2 things by themselves really cannot form what God's law is. We don't know. We need more to be able to tell what God wants from us. So how do we do that? Well, God is not going to talk to me and you, each and every one of us, for his own wisdom. So it's natural that God would say, okay, I will send messengers. And the Muslim thinking process goes like this. Well, God, send us messengers so we can understand what your law is. God says, okay, that's fair, I will do that. We say, God, make sure that they're humans so we can relate to them. Because if you send us a cow or an angel, that wouldn't really make sense. We'll freak out, right? You know, a lot of us would like to see angels, right? But I bet if an angel comes here, most of us would run out of the room, right? We don't know what angels look like for reality. So they have to be humans. And so God says, okay, then a logical question for us, because God is fair, remember, is to say, God, would you make sure that the humans that you send as messengers to us are all good? Because think about this. God's law relates to everything that we do. If you think that there is anything that exists in this universe that's outside of God's dominion or power, then you really don't believe in God, right? You believe in God, you believe that God has a connection or control over everything. So part of that is we say, you know, God, these messengers have to know everything and they have to be all good. This is a major distinction between some of the Judeo-Christian interpretation of prophet and the Islamic interpretation of prophet. There is a theological debate in some of the Judeo-Christian circles whether Abraham was good, whether Noah was good, whether Moses was good, but not to Muslims. To Muslims, all prophets are absolutely purely good human beings. And I want to emphasize human beings. They're not gods, they're not divine, but they're perfectly good human beings by the will and the power of God. This is, my friends, this will answer, if you get this point, this will answer the question that many have, which is why do Muslims react the way they react when Prophet Muhammad or any other prophet is insulted? When the movie The Last Temptation of Christ came out in Hollywood years ago, Muslims went and demonstrated in Hollywood. They were the only ones who went and demonstrated because Jesus is all good to Muslims. When Muslims see that other people try to insult Prophet Muhammad, they demonstrate because to them he was all good and he's a representative of God. It's an encroachment upon God. That's how they look at it. While the Western mind, well, this is freedom of speech, right? This is where you have a clash of understanding. What I advocate to Muslims to do is that now if you really want to have notoriety, If you're a non-Muslim or a Muslim and you want to have notoriety, all you have to do is insult Prophet Muhammad. Muslims will have, they'll be up in arms, the media will pick it up, and everybody will know, and it immediately will become world famous, like what Salman Rushdie did. Salman Rushdie was literally a failed writer from Pakistan, and he had attempted to write several things, and he failed, and finally he wrote insulting the Prophet, and Muslims were outraged, and everybody knew him. So it works for some people. So what I advocate to Muslims is that next time someone does this, ignore them. It's hard, but ignore them, because I believe that's what God wants us to do. I do believe in responsible freedom of speech, but that is what, at the heart of this issue of the holiness of prophets and prophethood. The second thing that you have to keep in mind is that, Muslims will talk to you, they'll say, well, Jesus is a prophet. The Bible says that Jesus is a prophet. But prophet, in the mind of a Christian, is much different than in the mind, the definition in the mind of a Muslim. A prophet in the mind of a Muslim is a much higher designation in the psyche of a Muslim. A prophet is someone who's pure, who speaks of God, who does everything good, and is seated next to the throne of God. Prophets in the Islamic faith are only good examples. I want to give you an example. For instance, I was auditing one of my colleagues' classes at the University of St. Thomas, and he was saying that Abraham, you know the story, Abraham, when Abraham found out that the Pharaoh was going to come and take his wife, Sarah, he told her, just say that you're my sister so he can take you without harming me. And so I told him, I commented, I said, well, Muslims cannot believe that Abraham would ever do something like that because he's all good. And his reaction, verbatim, I'm quoting him, he said, well, no, Abraham was actually a scumbag. And to me, and I told him, I said, this is blasphemy to me as a Muslim. You can't say this. He said, well, he was, because God sent him as a good and a bad example. What Muslims say is that God gave us a lot of bad examples, and the patriarch of bad examples is Satan himself. We don't need bad examples outside of prophethood. We need good examples. So that is one fundamental understanding, a difference in understanding of prophethood. Keep that in mind. So now the prophet is good, is all good, and he comes and he is all good. By the way, he or she, because Islam doesn't have a problem with women being prophets. Although that's not a common belief within, not belief, but it's not something that Muslims talk about. Because most Muslims come from male chauvinist societies. It's a fact. So the next question is, okay, God, now when you send these prophets and they're all good, make sure that the law, they explain the law to us, they live the law as perfectly as is fair to us. And God says, okay, so the law is infallible. And the law of God, according to the Islamic teachings, from the time of Adam until the time that Jesus comes back and implements the law, is all the same, and it's all good. There is nothing bad about it. There is no difference between what Abraham, what Isaiah, what Elijah, what Muhammad, what Habakkuk, what any of them have taught. It's all the same, because it's God's law. It's the manual, basically. Yes, it came in different languages, but God's communicated in different languages because He is fair as well. So now God does this, and now we take the first law and we start interpreting it differently. Translation, cultural interpretation, establishment manipulation for political, economic, power reasons. We all play with our faiths. Muslims, Christians, Jews, I don't care what your faith is, our establishments have played with our faiths. They manipulated it the way they wanted. Some of it is innocent, because I will tell you, when I look at the translations of the Quran into English, and I've translated about 73 books and writings and things like that, I feel very uncomfortable. It's just very difficult to translate it. I also wrote a book about the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, from different aspects, historical, linguistic, from every aspect you can think of. And part of it is also the translations of the Bible. Many of the translations of the Bible do not do justice to the original text. And as a translator, I can tell you that no matter how much you try, you cannot preserve the original message. Because many times, a book that has been written 1,000 years ago, or actually 10 years ago, even 10 years ago, many of you, seem to be my age or thereabouts. My kids talk, and every now I have no idea what they're saying. It's English, but I have no idea what they're saying, right? the language evolves that quickly. So imagine over 1,000 years. One of my favorite stories was actually, I think it was 1978 or 1979, I was with a cousin who since went back to Jordan. His wife Linda was in the car with us. We were driving somewhere. He was driving, Linda was sitting next to him in the front seat. I was sitting in the back seat. She said something, I don't remember what it was, but he looked at her and said, "Linda, keep your pants on." Now, I know what pants mean, I know what keep mean, I know what on mean, but I didn't know what keep your pants on. I honestly was stunned by that. I said, well, is she going nuts or what? But now just imagine 20 years later, or 50 years from now, when this term is completely gone, because people don't use it anymore. A translator, an honest translator, would take this story and translate it. What would they say? Yes, Ora was in a car and his cousin took her pants off. What I found in the Bible and in some of the translations of the Quran is that there are a lot of things like this that make me feel very uncomfortable. In one sentence statement in the Old Testament, the Arabic Bible or version states that the tribes were going west. There's one way and one way only to translate it into English if you do not understand the original meaning of that term, because it was a term. And this is translated into English as the tribes were going east. The reason behind that is because they were the direction of the water they would go to, and without taking another half an hour to explain this to you and understand it, but I understand how the translator translated this. If you chase this, if you go behind after this and try to strip away all the misunderstandings that happen in religion over time, I guarantee you'll find that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are exactly the same faith. Exactly the same faith. All the misunderstandings, all the differences in understanding that we have about the divinity of Jesus or not, was Jesus crucified or not, came about because of a translation, a slight translation at the beginning, that we as human beings, and I want to tell you that Muslims are as guilty of this as Christians and Jews, we take these mistranslations and make them into doctrines. I'll give you an example of Muslims. We all know that, if not all of us, for those of you who are familiar with Islamic history, you know that the Prophet Muhammad did not send a single inquisition outside of Arabia. He just fought against the people who fought him, basically. And there is, I have a very nice writing, about 38 pages in my website. You can download it and read this. It will explain to you in details the whole aspect. But the Prophet Muhammad didn't believe in sending expeditions outside of Arabia. Yet the day he died, Muslims decide that they're going to go and send expeditions outside of Arabia. Now, what Muslims today get themselves to, the point that they get themselves to, is that our early Muslims, the forefathers, have you heard that term before? Could do no wrong. Therefore, what they have done must be Islam. Their interpretation is right. And when you challenge them to this and say, wait a minute, you know, they were good people, good-hearted, maybe well-intentioned, maybe not. But they were nomads who made their economic superiority by attacking others and doing land grab and taking whatever they could from them. Maybe they made mistakes. No, that's blasphemy. Muslims are as guilty of this as anybody else. So we all are guilty of a lot of the same things. Now, you know, talking about these prophets, if you look, it puzzles me. After, you know, I have been a theologian for a good number of years and I have been studying this issue. It really puzzles me until this day that if you put all these religions next to each other, back from my computer days when I was young and I know about computers, right? You do a comparative chart between all these religions. If you look at the Islamic faith that believes in the immaculate birth of Jesus, that Mary was chaste, the Virgin Mary who gave birth to Jesus in a miraculous way, that Jesus spoke in his cradle and talked about his message, that Jesus is the Messiah, the only promised Messiah, and that he will come back to establish the kingdom of God. That Jesus had the Spirit, the Holy Spirit with him since birth, and it never left him. That Jesus is seated next to the throne of God and protected by God. Now I think, you know what, this is really close to Christianity. Yeah, we have differences, but what other faith comes this close to Christianity? What other two faiths share this much in common as Islam and Christianity? There are no two other faiths. In fact, I believe that the debate between Muslims and Christians should be an intra-faith debate, not an interfaith debate, because they are so close to each other. Even in areas where Muslims and Christians disagree, Trinitarian Christians disagree. You know, probably most of you, if not all of you, heard that Muslims do not believe that Jesus was crucified. Okay, you know, we can talk about this and we can reference the biblical facts and narratives of the crucifixions, and Muslims have their own debates and Christians have their own debates about this. But look at it from this perspective. Look at it from the perspective that Muslims believe that God loved Jesus, the Messiah, and that because he's the Messiah, and whose job is, the Messiah's task is to establish God's kingdom on earth, and because people were not ready for him, as he said in John 14, he said that people are not ready for him, that God protected him, took him up until people are ready and he'll send him back. This is really not a bad thing, even if you disagree with this interpretation. It really is not. So what happened? What happened that today, let's be honest, Muslims and Christians are at odds with each other. This week, my friends, I'll release an article that's called Islam and Christianity, Brothers at Odds. And if I have your email, I will send it to you. I'll give it to the organizers here and they'll send it to you. Islam and Christianity are one and the same from every aspect you look at it. And what happened, in my opinion, so that Islam and Muslims and Christians are at odds with each other, because I don't believe that Islam and Christianity are at odds with each other, because of a number of events, a perfect storm that's brewing right now. And the perfect storm is driven by like-minded people in both sides of the fence. I speak here, I want to disagree with the what do you call, Master of Ceremonies, Khalid here, who said I'm the best speaker in the Twin Cities. I think also I'm the best speaker in the Middle East as well. I have almost weekly articles in the Middle East explaining what I'm explaining to you about Christians, explaining there to the other side of the fence that Christians are good people and they intend good for you, they intend well for you. I have TV interviews, news articles, speeches, and you know, they're constant that I'm trying. Actually, tomorrow I have an article that's coming out in the papers to the same effect, that people on both sides of the fence have really no idea what's going on the other side of the fence. Really, if you did a study by the Gallup poll or anybody else, how many, and I'm using the term Christian here loosely, how many Christians would really know what Muslims believe about Christ? They don't. How many Muslims really believe that Allah is a different God than Yahweh, Jehovah, the Father, whatever you want to call him? Many. I actually heard some Christian preachers who talk, well, you know, your Allah is not as good as our God. Well, go to a Christian church in the Arab world. You're in for a surprise. Now, Westerners are not the only ones who are guilty of this. When Christians in Indonesia started using the name Allah in their churches, Muslims were up in arms. No, this is our God, you can't do that. That is the ultimate level of ignorance I've ever seen in humanity. So, church organizations, and I don't mean by church organizations, Christian organizations, Muslim organizations as well, it doesn't serve us well to really say that the other faith teaches almost the same thing that we teach. We have some differences. Because if Abdullah starts going to a church, or John starts going to a mosque, and they start donating at the other place, we start losing revenue. And then we are not as right as before. Then we don't control God. That's what it is about. We really want to control God. That's what religious people do. I mean, I use that term wrongly here. But a lot of clergy, a lot of people who speak in the name of faith do. The most expensive and marketable commodity today, Mr. Rotendi, is God. If you can sell God, Tony is an advisor to me and as a longtime friend and a prominent businessman. Really, if you can sell God, you can make a lot of money. Because if I can sell God to you, I will take your conscience. I will make you numb. I'll take your money. I'll take your house. I'll take everything that you have. I'll make you think exactly the way I think. And every single religion is guilty of this. So what we have and take it from someone who was looking at both sides of the fence on a daily basis. My wife is almost going to leave me because I'm constantly in the computer trying to see what's going on and trying to rebuttal people on both sides. On a daily basis, I get emails that say, Muslims are dangerous, they're going to kill us all. 1.6 billion Muslims are all dangerous and they're going to kill us all. We should counter them. There is a war between Islam and Christianity. Muslims are all terrorists, and there are a lot of Muslims who are helping the cause. We do. We have extremists. We have 65 million extremists in the Muslim world who are helping the cause. They want to blow up a van in New York. They want to blow up an airplane. They're suicide bombers. They speak in the name of the faith because they have been numbed. Their leaders have literally numbed them to think that they're doing the right thing in the name of God. This is the danger of religion again, of misusing religion. God doesn't want us to use religion like this. God wants us to love one another. That's the purpose of religion. And I'll explain that to you a little further in a second. But on the other hand, in the Middle East, we see the emails exactly doing the same thing. I see emails that are so outrageous, we share them sometimes, we look at them and say, can you believe this? That say, literally that paint every single American, sometimes even Muslim Americans as well, as traitors, dictator-loving people. They advocate the wiping out of everything Islamic. They advocate immorality. They advocate alcoholism. They advocate drugs in the name of Christianity so they can win over us. It's outrageous for you to hear this, right? One time, an evangelical Christian, I was in a debate actually in a church, and an evangelical Christian who was fair, he told the audience, he had two dolls in his hands. He had a doll that was dressed up nicely, modestly, and he had a doll that looked like Madonna. I don't know how I get that. Madonna, literally, and I'm not exaggerating this. She had, forgive me for the description, she had her breasts showing, basically, and a cross there. And he said, this is the average Christian woman in the Muslim mind. And you know who to blame for that? Hollywood, our Hollywood. That's what Hollywood paints the average Christian woman to the world. They don't advocate that Christian woman is a good mother, sister, daughter, who cares, who has a great sense of morality and responsibility. So there are people on both sides who are like-minded. I am absolutely stunned at the similar demeanor that the extremists in the Muslim world and the extremists in the Western world, Christian extremists, have, how much their approach, their theology, their politics, and their numbers are alike. There are 65 million Muslim extremists. There are 65 million Christian extremists, according to some studies. But for God's sake, they're both very wealthy. They're both very wealthy. And they are the ones who speak in our behalf. So God sends us the law. Let's get back to the subject. God sends us the law, and the law is really simple. Everything, when you look at God's law, the only thing that I can think about is, well, don't kill, great. Don't steal, okay. Don't cheat. God, I can figure this out on my own, right? Well then, but God, how many times should I pray? That's where it comes in the law. According to Muslims, you pray at least 5 times a day. At least, that's the prescribed number. You pray, actually Muslims pray more often than that. You pray every time you see something. There is the ad hoc supplication. Every time you see something, if you see a weak person in a wheelchair, for instance, you pray for them. If you see a blessing that you have, you thank God for it. If you see a homeless person in the street, you go and give them something and thank God that God showed you that homeless person before someone else, so that you can take credit for helping that homeless person in the eyes of God. You help the orphans. You eat the 10 Commandments. I'm working hard to explain to you what the 10 Commandments are. That's what the law is. Everything else, whether it's fasting, to be empathetic to the poor, whether giving charity to the poor so that you distribute some of the blessings that God gave you, or going to the pilgrimage in Mecca, if you can, once in your life, to follow the footsteps of Abraham, and to go through the cycle of what is life and death. All those really go to the same purpose, to fulfill the same purpose, which is to constantly remember God and to remember that you're accountable to God. All the Islamic laws are simple. I deal with a lot of converts to Islam, and they ask me, they say, there are a lot of things that I don't know where to start. And what I always tell them is that always ask yourself, what's the right thing to do? And very often they say, well, I found out that I was really following the right Islamic law. Because it's at the end of the day, what is the right thing to do? Islam, however, in its implementation today differs somewhat than Western Christianity. Western Christianity, as a reaction to the Middle Ages and the Illuminati movement, had emphasized love and forgiveness to show that it is forgiven, because prior to that, the Christians, in the name of Christianity, weren't very loving and forgiving. And my favorite story is that Bishop and my friend Dr. Terry Nichols just showed up, so if I'm wrong, correct me, please. That bishop who, there was a rebellion within the Catholic Church, and these Catholics didn't want to listen to the Pope. So the Pope sent the army, and they went to kill those rebels who were Catholic. Well, the soldiers came back to the bishop, and they said, we can't tell who's Catholic and who's not. He said, oh, kill them all and let the good Lord sort it out. That really sums up how Christianity was at one point. So Christianity had a reaction, and today Christianity is in the implementation of Christianity, in my opinion, in a lot of circles, is too politically correct. My friends, I know you came to speak to hear about Islam, but you know I believe in comparative theology, right? The Christian churches are failing in maintaining a good level of morality in their own societies. Instead, they're focusing on building bigger churches, in fighting with other Christian churches, in dealing with their own corruption, while the societies in the West are lost. The Quran in chapter 5 clearly instructs the Prophet Muhammad to say to Christians, turn back to the scriptures, implement the scriptures, and if you do, you will receive salvation. This is in chapter 5 of the Quran. I believe it is verses 43 and on, but I could be wrong. Where God says, let the people of the scriptures rule, live by the teachings of the scriptures. And that's what Muslims would like to see. That's what I'd like to see. I would like to see the people of the scriptures go back to churches and really learn and teach each other and live what Jesus had taught. By the same token, I would love Muslims to go back to the mosque and learn truly what Prophet Muhammad have done, and not to treat our history as orthodox, holy, unquestionable part of our faith, because it is not. I can talk for hours. I'll stop here, so hopefully you have some questions. Come on, ask me tough questions. Go ahead.
All right, is this recording it now?
I'll repeat.
I was wondering whether you would characterize extremists, whether Christian or Jewish or Muslim, as fundamentalists or not.
That's an excellent question. Are extremists fundamentalists? You know, we wrongly use the terms interchangeably, that a fundamentalist is an extremist, and that's really wrong. Because at the end of the day, I probably would be a fundamentalist, because I really do believe in my faith and I practice my faith. Does that make me a fundamentalist? But I'm really anything but an extremist. I hope not, at least. So I wouldn't, although I have to admit to you that very often we do, and that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong, because someone who adheres to her or his faith is someone to be praised, and even if we call him fundamentalist. Sure. Okay. Go ahead.
You stated that there was quite a bit wrong with different translations, both of the Old Testament, the New Testament, as well as the Quran. I'm wondering if you could recommend a translation of each of those.
Oh goodness. You know, I wouldn't dare speak about the Old Testament and the New Testament with such scholars as Dr. Terry Nichols and Philip Verding here, and others may not be aware of. So I will, if it's okay, I will delegate this to Terry.
At St. Thomas, in the theology department, we use the New Revised Standard Version. That follows the Revised Standard Version, except it's got inclusive language. But a lot of the older translations of King James are inaccurate in places. Okay. I mean, to really get it, I think you need to go back to the Greek or the Hebrew. But sometimes you get various words translated by one word in English or vice versa. But I think the RSV is about as close as you can get to the NRSV.
Let me elaborate.
I recommend a translation of the Quran. I'll leave that.
Yes, absolutely. There is a new translation of the Quran that's called Qulqari. It's really not very common, but I'm going to ask the organizers to email that to you, for the spelling. But still, when I read it, I always find myself saying, boy, I would translate this differently. As far as, just to add to what Dr. Nichols said, I really believe that if someone wants to become a scholar, you really need to know the original language. Otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice. To be a believer, I don't think you need to do that. But always keep in mind that, almost anything that you're reading could be misinterpreted or misconstrued in the translation. Intentional or unintentional, that's beside the point. In fact, even when we look at news analysis, translation of news articles, things really get lost in the translation quite often. Okay. But by the way, so far no tough questions. That was probably the toughest questions. I'm looking for tough questions, hopefully. Okay.
Good to thank you. I'm Christian and I don't know nothing about Islam. So I'm very grateful for the teaching today. And the question is, I have Muslims in my country, in my family. I'm from West Africa. So you talk to them, if you say Allah, tell them Allah. They matter as well, like you're talking about our God, like how you say. And if you have a question, tell me a little bit about Islam. Like, can't talk about it or something, So that's like all the time. See, I work with Muslims here, and it's like if you ask them questions, the way they react is like, oh, just let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very good, very amazing teacher. So I'm good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Absolutely, thank you. By the way, are you rooting for Ghana, by the way, today? Are you watching the World Cup? Who won the game? I have to ask. 1-1 tie. Okay, all right. Okay. That's the problem. That's where extremism starts. It starts at the level of ignorance. It really does. I was actually shocked when some people here scolded a Muslim when he said Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be with you, to one of his customers. They were some Somali sisters, and they said, well, how could you say Assalamu alaikum? That's only for Muslims. And that is completely outrageous. I mean, the Quran clearly states in a very clear verse in the Quran that when people greet you, greet them with a greeting that is better or at least equal. But that's what extreme, this goes back to, I want God all to me. It's my God. Instead of thinking that we belong to God, we think that God belongs to us. Really, all of this competition that goes on was summed up by the what do you call it? The boxing match between Holyfield and what was it? Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson supposedly had converted to Islam, and Holyfield became born-again Christians. And when Holyfield beat Mike Tyson, he said, "Well, now whose God is bigger?" This is, it's funny to us, but really, honestly, that's what a lot of people think. They think that God belongs to me. God created us all. God will judge us all. God is merciful with us all, and I can prove this to you all the time. God has a blessing on each and every one of us, every single day, whether you're Jew, Christian, Hindu, I don't care what you are, because we all belong to God. Muslims see many miracles, so do Christians, so do Jews. I actually asked one of the greatest Muslim scholars on the face of the earth today, a man in Lebanon. I said, how do you explain that? He said, because we all belong to God. God cares about every single one of us, even if we are wrong in our faith, even if we get something wrong. Doesn't mean that God is going to abandon us. That's, my friend, that's where all this comes from. Don't speak about Allah, He's mine. Or some people say, don't speak about Allah, He's the Muslims' God, which is wrong. Both of them are wrong, right? And, certain greetings, Arabic is for Muslims, which is all ridiculous. Some of the greatest Arabic literature in poetry and other things, Gibran Khalil Gibran is not a Muslim, he's a Christian. And he wrote some of the greatest Arabic literature. And the story goes on and on. God help us against extremists. And God help us against our own ignorance too. Go ahead, give me your tough question. Can we take a question here and come back to you? Just to be fair, if you don't mind. I'm afraid of you, actually. Just kidding.
You made reference to Trinitarian Christians, and I wonder if you would say a little bit more about how that might get in the way of paralleling Islam and Christianity.
Sure.
If there's a big emphasis on the Trinity.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I did an extensive study on how the Quran talks to Christians in the Quran, and versus how it talks to polytheists. And a lot of people, by the way, very often confuse polytheists and how God talks to polytheists and Christians and Jews specifically. People of the book, because some Muslim scholars, including me, include other people in the people of the book besides Jews and Christians. At any rate, when you look at how the Quran talks about Christians, it talks in a real loving way. Okay? It says, it describes them as, you know, when they hear the scriptures, their eyes are filled with tears for what they have recognized of the truth, that they are the most friendly and loving to the believers, and many other references. But then when it comes to the Trinity, God tells Christians, don't believe in the Trinity. Refrain. There is one verse actually in chapter 5 as well, where God says to Christians, refrain from the Trinity, turn back from the Trinity. God will open the gates of heaven for you. I mean, it's just a loving, even that verse is a loving verse saying, you know, come back. And this again goes to the most fundamental teaching of Islam, which is monotheism. To believe that God is the most powerful, the one and only eternal God. And for Muslims, and the Quran is very clear about this, you can't take others as gods besides God himself. Muslims also would actually contend that the Bible itself supports their view. You know, whether when Jesus was talking about, when people came to him and they said, good teacher, tell us how we can go to heaven, basically. And he says, why do you call me good? Only God is good. So there are several references in the Old Testament and the New Testament. You know, the first commandment is one of them, right? That say God is one and everybody else is separate from God, is a creature of God. That really doesn't, according to Muslims, that really doesn't take away from the status of Jesus. Because Jesus he's the Spirit of God. He's seated next to God. But he's not God. That's what Muslims say. This actually, in my opinion, is the major difference between Muslims and Trinitarian Christianity. And the reason I say Trinitarian Christianity, I was actually scolded one time nearly by a woman who said, I'm a Christian, but I don't believe in the Trinity. So I said, okay, from now on I'll be careful, okay? I wanted to respect that. What I advocate, my proposal to people who are leaders in Christianity, like Dr. Nichols here and others, and I have tremendous respect for Dr. Nichols, is that if Christians look in the Old Testament and the New Testament, they really see clear references. Some of them are by name, some of them are by implication to Prophet Muhammad and Islam. What if we step forward together and talk about Christians, you accept Muhammad as a prophet. It doesn't really take away anything from Christianity. It doesn't really take anything from Christianity. Wouldn't that bring us together? I think it would. After all, Prophet Muhammad himself, I don't know how many of you know, if it wasn't for Christians, Islam wouldn't have survived. The Meccans, the polytheists, were torturing and killing Muslims left and right. And Prophet Muhammad took a big portion of his followers at the time, they were small, and he said, go to Abyssinia, or modern-day Ethiopia, where there is a just Christian king. He'll protect you. And indeed, they went there, and he protected them. And years later, when Prophet Muhammad went to Medina, and that king died, Prophet Muhammad held a special prayer for him. And also in Medina itself, see, Muslims don't act like this anymore. I have to admit to you, most Muslims, I shouldn't say all Muslims, because we certainly would in the mosque that I go to. When the Christians came to visit him in Medina, the second holiest place on the face of the earth until this day is the Prophet's mosque. It's a holy place. The Prophet made sure that no Muslims in that night where the Christians were present would pray in the mosque. He said, pray at your homes. And history, clear Islamic history, says that the Christians set up mass, which tells me probably they were Catholic, set up mass, erected their crosses, and rang their bells. I think that's the ultimate level of love. Christians from the beginning, when they were anticipating the coming of the Prophet, traveled to Mecca and to Medina, and they waited for him there. In fact, this might surprise you. When the Muslims, in my opinion, violated the teachings of Islam and went and conquered Egypt, a lot of people would say, oh, it was a Christian country and Muslims occupied it. It's true, but it wasn't as clear-cut as that. Coptic Christians sided with the Muslims against the Byzantines. And when the Muslims took over Egypt and now they wanted to go on to Libya and beyond, they had Pope Benjamin of the Coptic Church hold a special prayer service for Muslims in his church, where the Muslim leader was there and the lieutenant was there, and he saw the Muslims off to the frontiers. So it wasn't really clear-cut, and Muslims and Christians at the beginning had a more intertwined history and collaboration that people think. It's later on, at the time of Crusades, when Pope Innocent III decided that he had too many Vikings. If he only knows what Vikings, how bad Vikings are today, right? He had too many Vikings who were, became Christian, and they had nothing else to do, and they were ransacking the countryside. He gave them a cause to go and free the Holy Land. The first thing that they did was kill other Christians, East Orthodox Christians in modern-day Turkey. They had a prostitute dance at the altar at the church. Then they went and killed Muslims and Christians and Jews and everybody else they didn't like. They were Vikings, they weren't Christians, in my opinion. But that really was the first spark that created tension between Muslims and Christians. And today, as I mentioned before, we have politics, we have a lot of other things that get in the way that want to inflame the hate between Muslims and Christians, while if people just pause for a minute, they will not find any two religions that are closer to each other than Islam and Christianity. That's a long answer to your question. I'm trying to avoid him. No, just, honestly, let's take his question, and Mr. Rotendi will come back to you.
Again, thank you.
Oh, he stood up, okay.
You mentioned that Islam and Christianity are very, very similar. The fact that Christianity claims the divinity of Christ in the New Testament, even the reference that you gave from the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus says, "Why do you call me good?" Most Christian scholars would say that Jesus is putting that back on a Jewish scholar who's asking the question to say, even you recognize that I'm good.
Sure.
And then it's actually a self-declaration of divinity. And then in 1 John chapter 1, where it says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
Yeah.
How is that a mistranslation of the original Greek, clearly a reference to Christ in that passage?
This would start a debate, and I would absolutely love to meet with you and go over this debate. But it really is, and forgive me for saying this, I absolutely would meet with you anytime, but it's really outside of the realm of this session. Let's get together. I would absolutely share with you, and I will share with you how Muslims rebuttal these statements. Okay? Sure. Go ahead. I'm sorry, actually, he put his hands up, and since he's my friend and his wife is with him today, I have to accept that,
Oda, you said that ignorance is prevalent in both the Christian community and the Islamic community, as well as the Jewish community. Okay, so what do we do about that? I mean, this is a kind of a germ here with 40 or 50 or 60 people, but how do you get through to the masses? Because clearly there is ignorance, and that is clearly breeding a mistrust and a misunderstanding, and even further than that.
What a fantastic question. Yeah, I know. Well, seriously, I mean, there is one concept in Islam that I didn't get to talk about that I really do believe that exists in Judaism and Christianity, and that is the fact that we need to strive to be good. Goodness just doesn't come to us automatically in an email or with UPS. We have to strive to be good. And that effort that we need to put forth comes through us educating ourselves. How much do you know about Judaism? Go to a synagogue and learn. How much do you know about Islam? Go to a mosque, see Muslims, ask them. The worst thing that I and you can do is I want to learn about Islam, I'll go to a book that is written by an anti-Muslim preacher and read. The worst thing that I can do to myself is, I want to learn about Christianity, is go to a book written by Osama bin Laden or one of his supporters about Christianity. I'm cheating myself. All I'm doing really there is to tell myself, I want to make sure that everything that I know is right. And that is devastating. the number one thing that I do is when I want to learn about something, I'll go to the source and the sources, the authentic sources of whatever that source is, and learn. That's the number one. The number two thing is, I can tell you this is an opportunity for me to do an advertisement. The Muslim Christian Dialogue Center at the University of St. Thomas, the Minnesota Council of Churches, both are represented here by great people. Do a great job. Get people together. You know, get people, call a Muslim and say, you know, come and talk to us. We have tough questions. We don't know. All we hear is that you guys are just ready to blow up everything. Is it true? Get a Muslim to come and talk. And what I ask you to do, as I ask Muslims here to do, because I can see Muslim faces here to do, is when you want to learn about Christianity or want to learn about Islam, get someone who knows. You know, Muslims are so enthusiastic about their faith that this might come across as wrong, and I apologize. I don't mean to put cab drivers down. Cab drivers will get up and speak as if they are experts in Islam. This is really devastating. And the same thing, you know, I ran into people who are so enthusiastic and they have so much love for the Bible, but they really are not theologians or anything like that. In fact, there is a gentleman in mind that I have who was laid off. He couldn't get a job, and he became an outspoken critic about Islam, and he's making a lot of money on it. You know, it's easy to get involved in something like that, but read, get groups together, you know, educate yourself, strengthen your faith too. It's good to do that. You know, you heard today that Muslims don't believe in the Trinity. Go and find out how Muslims argue and rebuttal them. That's good for your faith, isn't it? Okay? But the worst thing that you can do is go to a book that is already, one time a Muslim wrote a book against alcohol, right? And the title of the book was, Alcohol is Bad for You. Well, you don't need to read the book, you know that alcohol is bad for you, right? So if that's the case, you know, we don't need to make any effort. But that concept of we have to strive to be better is what's called jihad in Islam, by the way. You have to strive to be better. And the only way you can be better is really by educating yourself fairly and appropriately. Get to know the centers that are active. Muslim Christian Dialogue Center at the University of St. Thomas is doing a great job. Minnesota Council of Churches, there are many. There has been I don't want to call it a debate, dialogue between Muslims and Christians for 18 years now in the Twin Cities. Honestly, how many of you have heard about it? Look, can you believe that? Very few people. And it's not your fault who didn't hear about it. It's the fault of everybody else like me who are involved in this, that we don't advertise this to the world. We need to do more. But the bottom line is there are two types of ignorance. There is one ignorance that's forgivable, which is systematic, institutionalized ignorance that we can't get out of. You turn the news on, you're going to hear one story. You go to a church, you're going to hear one story. You go to a mosque, you're going to hear one story. That's what, in my opinion, is called systematic ignorance that's institutionalized by these organizations so that you don't know much about the other. I don't know how much we can do about that. But also there's ignorance that's unforgivable, where God gives you the option. There is a library here. Go and find, you know, one person said that we're all one nation under Google. Google everything, you know? You'll find a lot of things out there. That's how you do, learn. That's the answer to this. Go ahead, sir.
As I grow older, I've been able to see the commonalities of the great three monotheisms. But I wonder how Islam views the other major world religions, like Buddhism and
Yes.
Hinduism.
Sure, absolutely. You know, I'm not an expert in Hinduism and Buddhism. I've read books, I studied them when I went to school, but I cannot say that I'm an expert. I can refer to the people who call themselves experts, Muslim experts, and they say that they find a lot of things in Hinduism and Buddhism that are consistent with Islam. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think your question is how do Muslims view Hindus and Buddhists, not how Islam views. Because when you look at Islam itself as a faith, in one of the books that I wrote, I contend that all these faiths came from God. And I'll give you one quick example to think about. The idea of, and I'll call it the idea or teaching of baptism, okay? I really believe that it exists in Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's just that it took different forms, so now we think it's different for us. For instance, Muslims, if you ask a Muslim, have you been baptized? Oh goodness, no way, that's a Christian thing. Well, the first thing that when a person becomes a Muslim, they do, is they take a bathing. That's really baptism. And you know about Judaism, and you know, in India, every year they go to holy river and they wash. That's baptism in a way. But they took different shapes over time where we make the river holy instead of the act. You see what I'm saying? This is one of many examples I can bring you. But how people view each other, that's really complicated. Because what we do, this is the danger of all of us, we're all guilty of this, is it's like when we cook a meal, right? Not that I'm a cook, I'm not a good cook at all. But when we cook a meal, you know, we bring a little politics, we put in the pot, we bring a little economics, we put in the pot, racism, put in the pot, and then we put some spices on it, we call it faith. And we say, this is our faith. That's not what it is. You know, when you look at India, India had a long history of Muslims and non-Muslims fighting the colonialists at the same time, right? So is that a unity between Muslims and non-Muslims against Christians? Some today would bill it as that, and actually some do. But it wasn't really. It was a national movement, a nationalistic movement, right? And then, of course, we have the Pakistan-India issue. That plays into it, where people say, oh, you know, we need to fight the Indians. Well, why? Well, they're Hindus and Buddhists, and we're Muslims. It's easy. It's convenient. This goes to, if you look at this, it's not just interfaith problems, intrafaith. If you look at statistics, Muslims today, actually last year, I mean, this is an actual statistics. A statistic, 98% of Muslims who died because of, 98% of the people who died because of terrorism were Muslims, at the hands of other Muslims. So if you and I are sitting here, assume that we're both Muslims, and let's say that we assume we're both Sufi, right? And I really don't like you for some reason. You're a likable guy, but hypothetically, right? Okay, and then okay, well, he's a Sufi. I can't dislike him because we're both the same thing. Well, let me look for something else. Maybe you are a different, they call it tariqa, method of Sufism. Well, let's say that we're the same. Well, shoot, I can't dislike you because of that, right? I'll keep searching until I find a reason, a religious reason to dislike you, and then I make my conscience feel really good about disliking you. I'll go kill you, or dislike you, or fight you, or support a cause against you. That's how people are. Okay, any other questions? Go ahead. Hello?
Is there any hierarchy in the Muslim faith?
It depends on which Muslim.
There's an imam that does a call to prayer,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know much
Yeah.
about that.
Sure, absolutely. See, when you think about Muslims, a lot of people think that they're all just one faith, one sect, and that's really not the case at all. I have been thinking, and in fact I talked to my colleagues about this, I dream about writing a book today that maps Islam to Christianity or vice versa. The same exact debates have either taken place or are taking place as happened in Christianity. Whether, the verse that our friend there cited about at the beginning there was God, and with God was the Logos, and the Logos was God, and the same debate actually took place in Islam. Was the Quran God's word, or is it part of God, or did God create it? The same exact format. The same thing happens with authority. Should there be an authority that leads the Muslim community or not? Is that authority divine? Does it have any religious significance or not? In short, Shias believe that there is an authority. Basically, they do not have one person that they follow, but they have several qualified people. They call them about 8 people, who are 8 popes, if you would. That's what Shias have. They call them marja. One of them is Sistani, you may have heard of him. They have to be qualified, they have to study for 20 years or more, they have to, there's an extensive process through which they are elected. And after that, of course, they have representatives. Think of them as bishops around the world. And for instance, I'm a Shia Muslim, right? Our mosque is close by. And we have an imam who leads the prayer. What we do is we cannot just say, you look good, why don't you lead the prayer? We actually have to go through a verification process that this person did indeed study. He's not a troublemaker. He is, he's qualified. Basically, it's really a job application that they go through. If you want to look at Islam, the easiest way to look at Islam is look at Islam parallels the Catholic faith, Shias parallel the Catholic faith, and Sunnis parallel the Protestant faith. Sunnis do not have the same structure. So any person who is qualified or pious or leads the prayer, actually they accept him. So that's one of the differences. Egypt has Al-Azhar, which is the foremost authority in the Sunni world, but it really is facing a tough challenge by the Saudi Salafi establishment today. They want to displace them basically and take their place. We'll take a question back there, if you would, and then we'll come this way.
Good afternoon, my name is Mohammed. So when I was in Africa, sorry I don't speak English very much, and I saw on one of the mosques, I said mosque of Sunni or Shiite. I don't know where this come from, of meaning Sunni Muslim.
Sure.
Muslim. But I wanted to know what is the difference from.
Yes, absolutely. Again, when I started speaking today, I said it's not fair to me. God gave Noah 950 years to finish that, to deliver the message, but I'll try, okay? The fundamental difference between Shias and Sunnis is that Shias believe that the people who will come to lead and interpret Islam after the Prophet were assigned by God, and they base that on certain verses and the doctrine of justice of God. While Sunnis believe that it should be a matter of consultation between the Muslims, whether the elders of Medina, some say, or others say that it's a consultation between all of the people in Medina. Some people say that's a consultation between the tribe of Quraysh. But anyway, they say that we elect our leaders. That's what started the whole debate and the split. Okay? Shia means literally partisans or followers of. Sunnis means people who follow the Sunnah or the conduct of the Prophet. So both are good terms, but they ended up in a split in Islam. Go ahead, please.
I had a question about a question about the role of women
Mm-hmm.
in the religion. So it seems like it's a kind of a patriarchal religion,
Mm-hmm.
and that women are separated from men during prayer and all that.
Sure.
So what is the role of women?
Sure. Again, this is, by the way, you should have come to my class with Tony. That would have been good. Most Muslim societies, and not all, most Muslim societies are really male-dominated. So the interpretation of Islamic law are heavily influenced by the male interpretation. Not a bad interpretation, but it's a male interpretation. You look at everything, sports. I think it should be a God-given right for every man to watch any sports that he wants. Well, his wife is not there, right? Okay, so yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's just a factual interpretation, right? If you look at what Islam taught and what Islam teaches and how it's implemented, if you go, I'll give you examples. If you go to Iran versus Saudi Arabia, you'll find two different worlds, completely two different worlds. While just by contrast, and it's all based on what they understand Islam to teach about women and women's rights and everything else. If you look at Iran, they have more women representatives elected to their legislative body than we have percentage-wise in our Congress and Senate. 54% of college students are women. University professors, scientists, doctors, politicians, cab drivers, bus drivers are women, and nobody thinks anything of it. Car race drivers. And I mention this specifically because in Saudi Arabia, women are not allowed to drive. And when you ask, and as I did, when you ask a Saudi clergy, Muslim clergy, why don't you allow women to drive? They say, well, it's really complicated. Our society doesn't allow it. Well, why don't you say it's a societal thing? Why do you blame Islam for it? Okay. Now, when you look in the fine differences in the teachings of Islam, you'll find some Muslim sects who give women a lot more leeway in participating in public life than others. And it's all really, you can map it to what the Catholic Church does and the Protestant and the Baptists do. Muslims do the same thing. Muslims were influenced heavily by the cultures around them, as would do everybody. You can argue that Christmas, and I heard this many times, that Christmas is a pagan religion, but it's cool, right? We all enjoy Christmas, right? But Muslims also suffered from the same thing, which is when they went beyond Iran, it's called actually beyond the river area, which is modern day Afghanistan and Pakistan. People there used to wear what's called the burqa from olden days, way before Islam. And the way it came about was literally women, aristocratic women, used to have a lot of gold, and before they went out to interact with the peasants, they would put this covering on them so that people do not see the gold, so the peasants do not feel jealous and do not rebel against them. Well, soon enough, now the peasants, to give the impression, peasant women, to give the impression that they have a lot of gold, they start wearing the burqa. And now when Islam came, people said, oh, you know, this is okay. They didn't think of the long-term implications of these things. When you go to southern Iraq, or you go to southern Lebanon, and I specifically bring those two areas as an example, is that because they're both Shia dominated. You find the southern Iraqi environment to be extremely conservative compared to the southern Lebanese Shia community. They're much more open-minded, they're much more involved in the day-to-day life. The reason that you have this span is, again, because of cultural influence on the interpretation, while the faith itself does really give equal rights. But remember what I said, that the problem with Western Christianity, it became too politically correct. Islam doesn't have that problem, not yet at least. Okay, and what I mean by that is, you know, have you seen the Muslim prayer, how it is conducted? Okay, you know, and there are very good reasons for this. You know, everybody leans forward, they put their heads in the ground, and practically if men were standing behind women, it wouldn't be a good situation. It's just a practical thing. I'd like to give you a more sophisticated answer. Now, during the time of the Prophet, and in the two holiest places in the face of the earth, Mecca and Medina, until this day, men and women pray next to each other. But as we move away, we separate. And you think that it's men who are doing this. I was a president of our center here, and I wanted to eliminate a divider, to put a divider between men and women. I said, we don't need this. You know, this is America, right? I nearly had a riot on my hands by the women. They said, no, we don't want to be with you guys. You know, so there are a lot of misperceptions that people have, that it's really men who are driving this, it's women who are driving this. But a lot of culture who are driving, a lot of culture that's driving the perception about how women are treated in Islam. Go ahead.
I'm involved in human rights work in Minnesota.
Good for you.
And,
Excellent.
That's the main reason I came today. My perception of the fear and perhaps hatred that many Americans experience toward people of Muslim faith has nothing to do with your theology. Nobody knows anything about your theology.
That's right.
They probably care less. And so, at the most generic level, how are we who work in human rights going to help bridge this gap and mitigate this fear that exists between the majority American public and the Muslims, both who live here, who are parts of our community, and those in other parts of the world?
You know, Muslims, some people do horrible things in the name of Islam, as we all can observe. And the vast majority of it is driven by really hate and ignorance. I cannot justify it. There is no way that I can justify it. The faith doesn't allow it, logic doesn't allow it, morality doesn't allow it. It's just that some people are, in my opinion, bad. But we also have to be realistic to be able to solve any problem. Logical. What makes people do the things that they do? It's really easy for us, especially in good old Minnesota, where we love each other, right? To say, well, there is no way I would do what some of these people do. I think that's an overstatement. I think any of us are capable of doing things that we would surprise ourselves with. I will tell you, if someone, God forbid, attacks my children or grandchildren, if there is only one way to protect them from me, to put myself in front of harm and I die and so they can be saved, I'd do it at a heartbeat. Does that make me a suicide fighter? Call me whatever you want if that's the case. We have to be realistic and look at what is driving people to do this. Some of it is manipulation by extremist preachers. There is no question about that in the Muslim world, who see a benefit of creating a confrontation between Islam and America. They like the idea of having a confrontation between Islam and America because they can recruit, they can have a cause, they can manipulate people, they can control people. But also, our actions are, to a great degree, to blame. I didn't want to get into politics, but you forced me to get into politics. The flotilla had many Americans on it. In fact, an American citizen was killed on the flotilla. What did our government do? Did our government even condemn that killing? Did it ask for an investigation of that killing? No. you know, regardless of what stance you have towards what's going on in Iran. Israel has 200 nuclear warheads. Iran doesn't have any, by everybody's admission. Yet we're treating Iran a lot differently than we're treating Israel. This hypocrisy really drives hate. There is no other way. We can, you know, sit here day and night and try to pretend or justify political drivers behind what our government does. At the end of the day, it is what it is. Okay? So politics plays a great deal of this. The other aspect of this is that you know, when Norm Coleman was elected as a senator, I was invited to his lunch. So I was sitting there, actually I was sitting very close to him, and he was talking about, yep, we're going to go by golly to Iraq, we're going to make it a democracy, we're going to make the whole Middle East a democracies, and everything is going to be hunky-dory. And I asked him a fair question. I said, I knew him on a personal level before. I said, you know, Norm, this is really great. So you're going to eliminate the dictatorships in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt? He said, no, those actually are, you know, working for our benefit. Well, that right there creates a lot of hate and mistrust by other people towards us. We have to eliminate those things. We can, as Americans, we can get up in the morning, work from 8 to 5, watch the news for half an hour, go to our soccer games, hockey games, you know, go out with our families, have fun, and pretend that there is nothing going on outside in the world. But then we'll just have to deal with things that, you know, when September 11 happened, what happened? Why do they hate us? I don't think that anybody is justified in hating the average American, because I will contend that the average American is one of the best human beings on the face of the earth. But the average American is oblivious to what's going on around them. The former ambassador of the United States to Iraq was on the flotilla, and he came here was about 10 days ago. I don't know how many of you saw him. Me and my wife actually went and saw him. And he was actually in the flotilla. He spoke. And he said something that will stay with me. He said, the problem with Americans, us Americans, is that we don't know because we don't care, and we don't care because we don't know. That's really true. We have to educate ourselves. And if we educate ourselves, I guarantee you we'll elect different people, we'll have different political parties, our process will be different. We are the only country, proudly by a comedian, by the way, we are the only proud country to have an elected body that can be bought by money. So we have to deal with this. The second thing is education on the local societal level, of the local communities. This is really not the human rights job alone, but everybody who is connected to you know, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, or any, we need to educate each other about each other. Because we'll find, I want to quote my friend Dr. Nichols with something. He said, you know, Satan wins by making people of faith kill each other. And that is so, so true. And by the way, he's really doing a good job of it, or a bad job of it, I should say. Good. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I want to I want to remind everyone here, if they don't know, that Minneapolis is sister cities with Najaf, which is, I think, the largest city in southern Shia Iraq.
Yeah.
And I'm part of the group that had 13 people from Najaf here last summer, and Hunaida helped us transport.
Wow.
And we have 7 people coming in July, including 4 artists, and we have an art show which is 50% current Iraqi artists and 50% U.S. artists, and they all have done work specific for the show around the art of conflict and war and displacement, and
Perfect.
how it's impacted them. So this is a very small thing, but I would like to invite everyone here to come, and it's a way of educating
When is it?
ourselves. Well, the opening is July 29th. I just happen to have some cards with me. And it will run through August. And we'll also have a film, The Unreturned, which some of you may be aware of. It's a new documentary tracing several middle-class Iraqi families who have fled Iraq during the conflict and are not going back, and highlighting the difficulties about the professional and middle class being sort of gutted out of Iraq.
Yes. Yeah.
And many other things, but it's just a small thing about educating ourselves, our groups. We have many volunteers now, and we have a big email list, and educating them about about particularly people from Najaf, things going on in Najaf, trying to encourage a potential of commerce between businessmen in Najaf and Minneapolis.
That's fantastic. This all goes in the same effort. I really do believe that God loves you for doing this. I really do.
I love doing it.
Yeah.
I also could tell you all, during Aquatennial, the city of Minneapolis is putting out some money to celebrate its sister cities. And they're renting the Nicollet Island Pavilion and providing ice cream sundaes for
Wow.
families. Free ice cream sundaes. Come down and get acquainted with all of our sister cities. Minneapolis has 10.
Oh, really?
The newest of which is Najaf. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's something else people could come to. And
That's fantastic. Great. Excellent. We have one question down there. back there.
I'm somewhat familiar with Dr. Nichols' writings on kind of theology and science or creation. I'm wondering, in the world of Islam, how does Islam view the debate between evolution and creation?
Mhm.
What is the teaching of Islam?
Yeah. You know, when you look at the historical perspective, actually, from a historical perspective in the whole evolution discussion that's raging in the West, that still is raging in my opinion, it really was never an issue in Islam. Muslims just took a stance on it from the get-go that is clear and decisive in my opinion, which is, if you say that, evolution basically from my high school days, if you say that, all living beings started from water, then that's what the Quran says, we're okay with that. But if you say that we evolved from monkeys, then no, we don't believe in that. What Islam teaches is that God created human beings and initiated that creation, not make it evolve from other creations, if you would. Actually, what Muslims do is they take a lot of scientific theories and phenomena as proof for the existence of God. So they don't have a problem. That's really not an issue for Muslims. And by the way, that goes with abortion too. Muslims just take a clear stance that is logical, in my opinion, too, which is, it's just laid out and people don't discuss it. It's clear. So a lot of these issues that happen in the West, in Western Christianity and societies, are non-issues in Muslim societies. Go ahead, ask me the question. I'll repeat the question.
Because you raised that and you talked about the clarity, what is the clarity on the issue of abortion in Islam? I've not heard that.
It's clear, for one thing, the mother's life is much more important than the infant's life. Once the infant becomes a being, which they define, I can't remember, about 21 days or 40 days or something like that, you cannot abort it unless the mother's life is in danger or she cannot bear the pain. In fact, just 10 days ago, I received a call from a Muslim woman here who said, I'm pregnant, I have 2 other children, I go through such a pain that it actually endangers my life. Can I abort the child? And I said, how old is your pregnancy? And she said it was within the term. And I actually, just to be comfortable, because I didn't want to be responsible for this, I contacted a colleague and I said, you answer her, but I knew the answer. But late-term abortion, all that stuff is nonsense to Muslims. If a woman becomes pregnant outside of wedlock, that's a sin according to Islam. It doesn't give her the right to abort the child. So it's really a non-issue for Muslims. It's clear. Yeah. Go ahead.
Wait for the microphone?
Whatever you want.
When we interpret, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Gail Anderson from the Minnesota Council of Churches. They talked about, we have a program, so if you want to talk to me afterwards, that's fine. In the Christian tradition, and especially in the Protestant Christian tradition, I think it's an all Christian tradition, we believe in the inspiration of the Holy Spirit as we reinterpret our scriptures, as things change in the world for what is the right thing to do. Think like something like in vitro fertilization, which was around. How do Muslims make decisions on things ethical decisions on things that weren't around when they...
You have different Muslim schools of thought, or Muslims' legal school, jurisprudence, if you would. The Shias have that I talked about, the popes that I talked about, the marjas they're called. They are legal experts, so they interpret the law, and they don't have any problem actually with many of these things. So they take any new phenomenon, they study it within the law, and they issue a verdict on it. And sometimes they actually disagree on it. I'll give you an example: smoking. Okay, in the past, probably 50 years ago, 80 years ago, smoking wasn't proven to be harmful to the body. So the ruling was you can smoke, just don't smoke by me, right? But then when experts came out and said no, smoking is bad for you, now the experts, or these 8 scholars, are one after another saying it's forbidden, you can't do it because it's harmful to your body. So they deal with issues one at a time. With artificial insemination, if you would, same thing. They have debates, and the debates are, yes, you can do it. Does the child, actually the debate, does the child belong to the father or to the womb, to the mother or to the father? That's a debate, and they have differences, within that. And you, as a Muslim, you're allowed to follow the scholar that you think is more qualified in this case. That's within the Shia. That's within Shia. In the Sunni world, again, if it's Al-Azhar, they have actually dealt with it the same way as the Shia has dealt with it. The Saudis haven't even talked about it. I shouldn't say the Saudis, I'm sorry, the Salafis, because they're not just Saudis. I apologize. So they absolutely, they deal with everything. They do believe that God guides them through this process. All Muslims believe that God guides them through this process. In fact, I get questions on a daily basis of people saying, well, can I do this? What do I do in this situation? And I always pray, because I really do believe that this is, you're in a way representing God when you're answering, because you're saying this is what God's law is. You look at the law, you act as an expert with this. You look at all the evidence that you have, and then you state your opinion. So at the end of the day, whether it's really a Christian clergyman, a rabbi, or a sheikh, we're just lawyers, or attempt to be lawyers. That's what it is.
So if we would say we are helped by the Holy Spirit in making these interpretations, and we certainly would also look to the experts more than ourselves, it's a real similar process.
Oh, absolutely. The Quran has many references where the Holy Spirit comes to the believers and helps them through times of hardship. Absolutely. Yeah. I know you're smelling the food now, so questions are starting to. If you have any more questions, I'll take them. Otherwise, we can go have some food. Thank you very much. I appreciate it and appreciate the feedback.
Just some final remarks. Food, I think, is ready to be served. So enjoy the food. Thank you again for coming. As you leave, if you have any questions about anything that's been mentioned in the speech, you can just leave your name and contact, and we should have a recording of this event. So it'll be ready in a few days. Leave your address if you want a free copy. So all the materials on the table is free, so enjoy that as well. And thank you again for coming.